It doesn't matter what softwares you know today, because with time, every technical skill gets outdated. What truly stays with you are the core principles, your mindset, and the way you think about your subject. Welcome to the Foundations for UX Design, a 15-episode series that will take you through all the important lessons and realizations I've had so far as a self-taught UX designer. My name is Ansh Mehra and I am a product designer and storyteller at Zuddle.com, which is a virtual events hosting platform. In this session, we will be learning some of the most common mistakes students make when they begin their career as a UX designer. I hope you've seen all videos from the series preceding this episode. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this session. So without wasting any further time, let's get started. Every time you open the Figma community file of a really popular design system, you feel very inspired by the way they organize their primary, secondary, and tertiary buttons, but very few video tutorials actually go deep into the step-by-step process of declaring those variants properly. Because even though a lot of people know that your buttons can have an icon on the left or right, they have primary, secondary, tertiary, there is a lot more that goes into the process of building a good UI button system, and that is what we will discuss today. So welcome to lecture 9 for this entire series. And before we go deep into the entire concept of making buttons, let's just understand how does a button even work and what is the anatomy of a button. On the outset, it's very easy to say that yes, every button is basically a call to action. And you can have different kinds of buttons. You can have rectangular buttons, you can have pills, you can have smaller buttons, big buttons. And there's always this confusion in between new designers as to how do we declare this in the handoff? Because we can't really make small, medium, extra large buttons for every single use case. So that is a misconception. When you make buttons, you're not supposed to define like a small, extra large, extra large, depending on the widths. If you do that, you would get into some sort of a problem. So what you have to first decide is the padding that you will have on all the four sides of your text label. That is the most important aspect of the entire anatomy. So here is a button here, and this is an auto layout. You would have to use auto layout when you're making these things. And of course, you have some sort of internal padding on top and at the bottom and left and on right. But because of line height, because of this intrinsic line height that you have with every text label, you might have to add some extra padding on left and right. So I've opened the auto layout container here, and you'd realize that I have 8 pixels on top and bottom, but 16 pixels on left and right. The same happens with my icon as well. So this is one variation where I just have my label text. This is a variation where there's an icon on the left side, and in this variation, I have an icon on the right side. So in all cases, the padding remains the same. So I don't see that this is a small button and this is a medium button. I see that it doesn't matter what you have inside the auto layout, the padding remains the same. Now, there's a very interesting issue that comes up when you're conducting the handoff, and that is that if you have equal padding on left and right in buttons where you have icons, you'd realize that the button looks slightly narrower from the right side or on the text side of things. And if you add, maybe 2 pixels or 4 pixels extra on the text side, you realize that, oh, now things look slightly uniform. You can compare these two. This has 4 pixels extra on the text side. So this padding is 16 pixels, and in this padding, I have actually added 4 pixels extra. Why does this happen? Because every icon, now this depends from icon pack to icon pack, but in this specific case, I'm using something a pack called box icons, and all of these box icons have some intrinsic padding. So even though the vector begins from a specific point, this is where the vector begins, the icon frame is larger than the vector itself. So this part of the icon, which is basically alpha, there's nothing available there. This part actually confuses you. And when you see your items on the develop side, you're confused as to why are these things not equal? This is the exact reason. So if you don't choose your icon packs well, this is a problem that you would encounter. So you have to sit with your developers and basically test as to how do these paddings look like. So if you feel that equal padding on left and right would work for the icon pack that you have chosen, then everything is well and good. But in most cases, you might have to add an extra padding on the text side of things. Now, a lot of people ask me what icon packs should we use in the first place. I would recommend you to, consider two very important parameters. The first parameter is that whatever icon pack you choose should have an open source Figma community file, because it's going to be very difficult for you to import all the SVGs, name them properly. So you skip a lot of homework when you directly import the Figma community file. The second is that your icon should be NPM compatible. That is, there's this pack that the developers can use, and with some lines of code, they can instantly import that icon pack without much load. Otherwise, your developer would have to export every single pack again and again and organize them. And it's just too much effort. So two recommendations. One is Remix icons. Then there's box icons. There's feather icons as well. I'm not sure which one of these would have NPM, but I think Remix icon and box icons, they both are open source and they have NPM packs and they have a Figma community file as well. Moreover, within the icon pack, it's always good to have solid icons as well as line-based icons. So this icon right here is a solid icon because it's filled. But in the same icon pack, I would also have an option to use something which is just an outline of the magnifying glass. So that is something that you can consider. Now, every button has a label text and the placeholder for icons, but these two items can be rearranged in some specific combinations. Within those combinations, you would also have different states for that same button. So there is a default state, which is basically the common CTA. Then you have a hover state when you have your cursor on top of the button. Then you have a pressed state where you actually have this half a second gap where your cursor has clicked on that button, right? And then there's a focused state. This is a state that very few people know about. Usually a lot of new designers forget to consider this. But every time you go on a website, you can actually navigate through the important CTAs by pressing the tab key on your keyboard. So when you press tab, you can check this right now on YouTube as well. Try clicking tab and your cursor would automatically hover over specific buttons. So that state is called the focus state. And then there is the disabled state as well. So in the hover state, what you can do is a very simple hack is to have a white stroke at 25% opacity, which would usually look good on almost every color. So even if this color changes, things would look good because, it's white with a 25% opacity. But if your CTAs are going to have uniform color throughout the entire user interface, then you can probably have 100% stroke of whatever color that you like. Because I usually stay away from opacity based color styles. They usually they actually are very tricky to play with. So if you're careful with them, it's all good. But in most cases, you might lose out on some advantages. Now, in the press state, I would usually go ahead and reduce the opacity of my button text. So it feels like you've just pressed something. Like, I don't know if you can remember, but every time you click a button, the text also reduces in opacity. And then this is a very interesting way to have a focus state. It's basically some sort of a glow that you can add. And you have your own creative liberty on this. You can do whatever you want. But in the disabled state, in most cases, the entire button is at low opacity. Now, make sure that when you're making these buttons, you use your color styles and all the text styles that we have declared or we have discussed in the previous episodes. That is extremely important because if you make your buttons first, then make your color styles, then import your icon pack, or maybe then make your typography, then it doesn't make any sense. So this entire series in a specific order so that, you have your spacing, your padding and everything in place. Now, I have mentioned that you have to use the NPM compatible and the Figma community file compatible icon packs as well. So we've already discussed that. So let's move on to icons. How do you play with icons and your label text? See, there are three combinations. There's either no icon, left icon, or right icon. And you would have to declare separate variants for all of these things. So this is pretty straightforward. I think this is easy to understand. But my point was that once you've declared your default and your hover and your focus, then you have to make similar stuff for your no icon, left icon, and right icon pack as well. Then once you are done with your primary, we come to the secondary buttons. And one very important point to note here is that when we talk about our primary buttons, the fill for these buttons is usually your brand color and the text and your icon is usually your contrast color. But when we talk about secondary buttons, they're usually either in grays or in white. So you have to specify this to your developer as well, right? In a lot of platforms, you can override the color of these buttons, but we would not get into that complexity. But it's very important that you have a specific palette of grays, which we discussed in the previous episodes. and you use your grays and whites for your secondary buttons. It's very tricky to use your brand colors for secondary buttons, but if you feel that it's suiting your aesthetic and if that's your use case, you can always go ahead with that. But the structure usually remains the same. But in most cases, when you talk about secondary buttons, there is no fill. It's usually an outline. In hover, you can have some sort of fill, maybe at 25% opacity, so that it feels that you've clicked over it, because otherwise there's very less creative freedom that you have. I mean, how would you show the hover state, right? Because this stroke is already there at 100% opacity. So you can't really overlay something on 100% white stroke. In the earlier pack, when we were doing the primary button thing, there was no stroke here. So we could have used the stroke trick. What you can do in secondary buttons is that you can have a fill at 25% opacity. And then, focus state is also pretty much sorted. Then you have your press state, and then you have your disabled state. Now, I have made these buttons as a sample. You're not supposed to follow this exact visual design. The point here is to just understand that when you're making your system, you have to consider these things. Now, we come to tertiary buttons. In most cases, tertiary buttons don't even have an outline in their default state, because you usually want minimum attention to all of these buttons. But when you talk about hover state, you can probably have a fill but not a stroke, simply because a stroke is more jarring. It grabs more attention. So you can probably have a 25% opacity white, or you can have a subtle color for your hover state for your tertiary button. Then I think this is the focus state. I think this is the clicked state, because I can see that the button text is at a lower opacity, and here is my disabled state. A lot of people also add an underline to the tertiary state simply because it feels more clickable, because without a button, without a stroke, or without an underline, a lot of people feel that, this button is not intuitive enough. So if you feel that you need that, you can always keep that. This problem usually comes in no icon labels. But in most cases, when you have an icon followed by a label text, then people know that I might be able to click it. But putting an underline always makes it absolutely like super, super clear. Now, this is something from a development point of view as to how do developers even code this. And I thought that this is a very important topic, especially for designers who are just entering the field. See, these buttons are made in CSS. And your front-end developer will basically declare all of these different states. So we discussed there's default, there is pressed, there's focus, there's hover. So how do developers even make this? See, we'll discuss a very basic example here. So on the left side, I have my primary CTA, and here I have my secondary CTA. So in their CSS file, they use something which is known as a class, which is basically defined by this dot. So they would write dot followed by the name of that class. So this button would come under my primary CTA class. And then they would add, their color, their text, and anything that they would want within these two brackets. Similarly, for the secondary button, they would have something like dot followed by secondary CTA. So this is my class. So classes can define your primary, secondary, and tertiary. But what about default, hover, press? That is the second layer of declarations, like a second layer of customization. And that is done through selectors. So if this is my primary button in its hovered state, they would add this selector, which is in this case hover. So in this code, in this specific code, they would say that, for hover, I would probably add a stroke, right? So they would add that in the code itself. If I take the secondary CTA example, then also for this thing, for designing this thing in the code, they would pick the secondary CTA class followed by the hover selector. To be honest, a lot of developers are now shifting to Storybook. I would recommend you guys to Google what Storybook is. It's basically a very, very, very useful software to, keep a track of all your UI elements, like organize all your UI components that you make on Figma. So you might have to read a little bit about React.js, or you might have to read a little bit about how Storybook works. So they have compositions and they have different stories. So we will have a video on that as well. But just to give you a quick understanding, because you would always be wondering as to, I am making these variants on Figma, but how do these variants convert in code? So classes and selectors are basically like a very simple way to understand how these things are translated on the front end side. Now, I would recommend you to read 3 articles. I have decided to keep these videos shorter simply because it becomes easier for you to digest all these things. So we've covered the basics, but I want you to do your own homework and make notes and do something hands-on, because we've covered the basic stuff, but now you have to do some more reading on your own. So the first article is going to be on cloud4.com and it's called Designing Button States. It's written by Tyler Stika. I hope that I'm pronouncing your name right. Then there's an article on Medium called Basic Design System Button States by Scott Oliveri. And then in the end, I would strongly recommend you to check out W3 Schools, even though this is a website that is usually referred by developers because they teach you how CSS works. Just by reading on CSS buttons would give you a lot of clarity as a designer, because the more you understand the functioning of it, the more you understand the front end part of it, the better you get at making the right decisions, making scalable decisions that are easy to develop. And there's a lot more to read on this specific article because they go deep into, combining buttons together, adding animations and all those different kind of things. Now, for additional learning, a lot of sessions are available on Graphy. This entire series covers the basics, but all my sessions on Graphy would cover things that are complementary. So we talk about documentation on Notion, we talk about social media posters and carousels, we also talk about the art of learning fast and earning more. That is, how do you learn things quickly and how do you monetize those things? There's also a session on how to get a design job that pays you well, something that a lot of students are confused about. And then there's also a very interesting 4-session course at a very, very low price, which is basically me discussing my notes from Notion. I document things on Notion from my favorite books, movies, and podcasts. So we go through that entire thing, all the insights that I've received. So you can check out all of these sessions by going on anshmehra.graphy.com and you can access unlimited replays once you get the sessions. So if you like this session, make sure you like the video, make sure you comment your review, and make sure you hit the subscribe button, because if you follow this entire 15 episode series, I can assure you that a lot of your queries would be solved and you would have enough to kickstart your journey as a self-taught UX designer. I would love to see your review on Instagram. You can follow or connect with me on anshmehra.work, or on Twitter, I am anshmehra with 3 A's at the end. With that being said, I hope that you're taking care of yourself. I hope that you're learning and documenting everything that you know, and I will see you next time. This is Ansh Mehra signing out. If you like this video, make sure you click on like and hit the subscribe button. I regularly upload videos on UX design, marketing, and storytelling.